Hello and welcome to The World Today, everyone. I'm Richard Nta in Nairobi. We begin with the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, and the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels have claimed responsibility for a missile attack on Israel, their first since the conflict started. Military spokesman for the Houthis, Brigadier General Yahya Saree, said they fired a barrage of ballistic missiles targeting what he described as sensitive Israeli military sites in southern Israel. The Israeli military said it intercepted a missile. The Houthis' entry into the war raises concerns they may target Red Sea shipping, risking further global trade disruptions. The group has attacked over 100 merchant vessels with missiles and drones, sinking 2 vessels and killing 4 sailors from November 2023 until January 2025. Disruptions in the Red Sea would cause further chaos in global shipping, which already is reeling from Iran's stranglehold over the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow mouth of the Persian Gulf through which a fifth of all oil and natural gas once passed.
The Yemeni armed forces, with the help of Allah Almighty and relying upon Allah, have carried out the first military operation using a barrage of ballistic missiles targeting sensitive Israeli military sites in southern occupied Palestine. This operation coincided with the heroic operations carried out by our Mujahideen brothers in Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon. By the grace of Allah Almighty, the operation successfully achieved its objectives. Our operations with Allah's help will continue until the declared objectives are achieved, as stated in the previous statement by the armed forces, until the aggression against all fronts of the resistance ceases.
Well, let's get more on this. Ihab Alfandi is in Sana'a, Yemen, and Jonathan Regev is in Tel Aviv, and they're both joining us live with the very latest. Ihab, let's start with you. The Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen have confirmed they have attacked Israel for the first time since the start of the U.S.-Israeli war with Iran. What more can you tell us? What do we know?
Yes, the military spokesperson for the Houthi group, known as Ansar Allah al-Husari, announced that the group has officially entered the confrontation alongside Iran against Israel and the United States in a move that marks a notable shift in the course of regional escalation. We are talking about their entry into the battle roughly 3 weeks after the outbreak of the U.S. war against Iran, which indicates there may have been a prior coordination between them under what is known as unity of the fronts. He explained, Yahya Saree, in a statement released this morning, that the group carried out its first operation by launching ballistic missiles targeting what they described as sensitive military site inside Israel, southern Israel, stressing that this strike represents the first military operation in this trajectory. It shouldn't be forgotten that the military spokesperson had warned in a Friday evening, that yesterday, what I mean here, statement that any U.S.-Israeli military escalation would lead the group to officially join the battle. The statement also, what we can notice here, noted that the operation coincided with similar activities carried out by forces in Iran, by Hezbollah and Lebanon, and that the operation succeeded in achieving its objective, according to a statement. The statement also added that military operations will continue until the declared objectives are achieved and to stop what they described Houthi groups as aggression across all resistance fronts. So once the aggression, what they call, according to Yahya Saree, stops against Iran and all the fronts, Houthi group here in Sana'a will definitely stop their operations very soon.
All right, Ahab, let's dive in a little deeper. Ahab, do we know if there has been any announcement by the Houthi rebels on the Red Sea corridor? Very important.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. So, yesterday, the statement that issued on Friday evening, Yahya Saree, the spokesperson for the military spokesperson for Ansar Allah Group, pointing that very clearly, hinting that they will resume. They could resume the operations at the Red Sea if there are any hostile activities by U.S. and Israel against Iran or any Islamic countries, according to what he pointed exactly. He stressed that. So if there are any hostile activities against Iran, Lebanon, Iraq, or Palestine, we will resume the military operations in the Red Sea, reaching to the Mediterranean Sea, as it took place over the past 2 years, supporting Palestinian people. We will stand up. We will target the American Israel vessels that are heading to the Israel, or any ship that helps Israel or U.S. Reaching the goods to the occupied territories, according to Yahya Sari. And that means here maybe also there are high possibilities that the Bab el-Mandeb Strait could be closed, and maybe this will be rattle the global economy. So if and they are the Yahya Sari warned that very clearly. If there are any hostilities against Iran, we will definitely resume military operations at the Red Sea, reaching to the Mediterranean Sea, and this scenario will be repeated as it happened over the 2 past years.
All right, Ihab, important point that you brought there to our attention. Let's now bring Jonathan Regeb into this conversation, standing by in Tel Aviv. Jonathan, you've heard what Ihab has had to say. What has been the reaction, though, in Tel Aviv of the Houthis' involvement in the conflict, and what are the government's plans in containing their attacks? Jonathan?
So there's an expected cabinet meeting later on tonight, this afternoon, meant to basically decide on how to react on this latest development. There was a constant expectation for the Houthis to join this campaign, maybe even earlier during the war. Israel did expect the Houthis to join, and much sooner than a month into the war. But the question that Israel is now asking is whether this is a one-time thing, the Houthis firing a missile in order to show solidarity, and that's it. Or are they joining the campaign full-fledged? And this is something that Israel has to see how much the Houthis are involved. Of course, for Israel to deal with a third active front after it is already constantly fighting in Iran and in Lebanon, each of them demanding a lot of attention and a lot of interceptors, that would be a major headache for Israel. Having said that, we have to remember, and as was also just stated, if the Houthis are joining the campaign, then this will probably not be only an Israeli problem. As you mentioned, the Houthis have the ability to close and disrupt the maritime movement along the Bab el-Mandeb, the entry to the Red Sea, and that would disrupt the maritime movement even more than the Strait of Hormuz, because that would mean that any movement headed to the Suez Canal in Egypt, headed from Asia towards Europe, towards the northern parts of Africa, they would be disrupted. And therefore, if the Houthis are really joining the fight, the expectation in Israel is that this would not only be an Israeli fight, but some sort of a global fight.
All right. Ihab Al-Fandi in Sana'a and Jonathan Regeb in Tel Aviv, we thank you both for your insights and analysis. Let's get a different perspective on the latest developments. We are joined by Naeem Jinnah, Executive Director at the Afro-Middle East Center. He's joining us from Johannesburg. Naeem, welcome to the program. Welcome to The World Today. Let's first and foremost, Mr. Jinnah, what does the Houthi rebels' involvement in the war mean at this juncture and at this moment?
Well, the involvement, I mean, it's been basically an announcement. That's a verbal announcement, but also the one missile that they sent. But it's an announcement that they are now involved. And what that indicates is a new escalation. It follows, of course, yesterday's attacks by Israel on several civilian areas in Iran, but also Iran's nuclear, energy and steel industries, which Iran had warned that if that happened, there'd be an escalation. So we're seeing the escalation now, and I think the next few days and weeks will show how far the Houthis are willing to go.
All right, I guess the important question that needs to be asked is, what will be the impact of this to the war, and how will it change the course of the conflict, if any?
Yeah, that depends on how deep the Houthis, or Ansar Allah as they call themselves, get into this. So, the one possibility or one scenario, of course, is that they would increase their attacks on Israel, which is, the first missile that went was directed towards Israel. They have ballistic missiles. They have hypersonic ballistic missiles, we know. So that will add to the pressure on Israel coming from Iran and Lebanon at the moment, but also then from Yemen. The second possibility is that they would assist Iran in the attack on Saudi Arabia. There's no love lost between Ansar Allah and the Saudis, so that's the other one. And the third one, of course, is that they could possibly close the Bab al-Mandab Strait, which they had done previously, if you remember, during the intense period of the genocide in Gaza by Israel against the Palestinians. Ansar Allah had closed Bab al-Mandab Strait, and that meant that shipping couldn't get through the Red Sea, couldn't get through the Suez Canal, had to come down on the east coast of Africa, or south on the east coast of Africa. And that will, of course, increase the pressure on trade, which already is difficult at the moment, will make it much more expensive. So there'll be implications for the region, implications for Israel, implications for the global economy, and of course any Israeli or American linked ships that come close there, they will likely attack. So it's a serious escalation that's taken place.
All right, serious escalation. You spoke of implications. Let's talk more about that. What will be the impact to the world and the Horn of Africa in particular?
To the world, it means that supply chains will be stressed. Things will take longer to get to where they're supposed to be getting, particularly from the east to Europe, for example. If the Suez is closed or the Red Sea is closed, that means that prices of several commodities will go up. There'll be greater shortages. Already, even without that being closed, we're seeing shortages in everything from fuel to computer chips. That will likely increase. Prices will go up, as I say, and there'll be long-term consequences of that in terms of restoring those supply lines and filling backlogs, etc. For Africa and the Horn of Africa in particular, I mean, for Africa, of course, this does mean which we're already facing, shortages in various regards, as I've spoken about, but also strain on our exports. We're seeing Kenyan tea, for example, is having a problem with its exports. South African fruit, similarly, that will increase. There might be some marginal benefit, and it's not clear that will be the case. If ships were to come south along the east coast, it depends on whether they want to stop on that journey or not, and what that would mean. But also, finally, for the Horn of Africa, I think this would place the Horn, in a sense, at the center of things. I mean, the distance between Yemen and the Horn of Africa is, it's a lake, not an ocean.
Mr. Nta,
and also that Horn area, you have Israel there, you have the United Arab Emirates and Israeli allies.
Mr. Nta, unfortunately, we've run out of time. We're going to have to leave it there for now. We do get the sense of what you're saying. Thank you so much, Mr. Nta, Executive Director at the Afro-Middle East Center. Thanks for that. Well, that is it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Thanks for watching. take a look at China's vice president's official visit to the Seychelles. Diplomats at the WTO Ministerial Conference say concrete reform work plan is within reach as constructive talks happen. And the M23 fighters pull out of some DR Congo villages without combat. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. Coming up in business, Ethiopia urges citizens to adopt alternative means of transport amid global fuel supply crisis. And Senegal prepare for their first match since being stripped of the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations title. Once again, a very warm welcome to Africa Live. Let's begin with our top story. Chinese Vice President Han Zheng is on a two-day official visit to the Seychelles aimed at strengthening bilateral ties between the two nations. During the visit, Han is expected to hold talks with President Patrick Hermini and Vice President Sebastian Pille, as well as tour key projects funded by the Chinese government. Now, the trip also coincides with celebrations marking 50 years of diplomatic relations between China and the Seychelles. Well, bilateral relations between China and the Seychelles are entering a new phase of expansion, driven by rising trade volumes and growing private sector collaboration, as well as emerging cooperation in the blue economy and digital innovation. CGTN's Daniel Arab-Moy reports.
In 1976, the Seychelles became a sovereign nation and a new hand was extended from the east. China was among the first nations to officially recognize the archipelago's independence from British rule. It marked the beginning of a long friendship that would later transform the small island state in the Indian Ocean.
This 50th anniversary will allow us to take stock of what we have achieved in different fields: education, health, infrastructure, economy, cultural, environment, and otherwise.
In 2024, at the FOCAC summit in Beijing, relations between the two countries hit a new peak. Ties were officially elevated to a strategic partnership, moving away from aid to equal cooperation. Available data shows that bilateral trade between the two countries has maintained a strong momentum, reaching $84 million in 2024. China mainly exports high-tech products like smartphones, high-end camera systems, and mechanical and electric products, among others, while Seychelles primarily exports seafood. But the future is now turning offshore as both nations look toward the blue economy. They are working together on sustainable fisheries and protection for the very ocean that feeds Seychelles. Daniel Arab-Moy, CGTN.
Senior diplomats attending the World Trade Organization Ministerial Conference in Cameroon have said there is a commitment among ministers to reach an agreement on reforms, but India and the U.S. have resisted some proposals. The diplomats declined to be named due to the sensitivity of the talks. The four-day meeting in Uganda comes as the WTO faces a critical test to its future amid a year of tariff-fueled trade turmoil and large-scale disruption to shipping, energy prices, and supply chains due to the Middle East conflict. While India and the U.S. have acknowledged the need to reform the global trading system, they have rejected a substantive work plan on reforms. However, delegates from Norway and the U.K. say a concrete reform work plan was within reach and that constructive talks were being had. The UN's International Trade Center Executive Director Pamela Coke-Hamilton says a reset is going to be a critical move for the World Trade Organization. She was speaking on the sidelines during the World Trade Organization's 14th Ministerial Conference in Yaoundé, Cameroon. Her statement comes after the WTO chief, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, called on countries to overhaul global trade rules, telling them the old world order had gone for good following a year of turmoil sparked by U.S. tariffs and geopolitical tensions. Okonjo-Iweala set out a list of problems facing the organization, including the paralysis of the dispute settlement mechanism at the start of the four-day meeting of the body. Some diplomats and trade officials warned that Without an agreement on reforms, countries could start abandoning the ideal of a rules-based global trade system and set their own regulations.
Fundamentally, what most developing countries would like is, first of all, to ensure that the interests of developing countries remain paramount in the negotiating process. Because at the end of the day, they're always the price takers. That's just the reality of how the system is governed. So they want a credible, time-based, rules-based roadmap for how we're going to get to this next point for MC15. There's also, of course, the dispute settlement mechanism. Can you be part of an organization or a system that doesn't have an endpoint for decision-making? You know, we get to this, but we can't. And so it creates, in a sense, a certain frustration and sometimes disillusionment because, you know, what's the point? But I think that there is still at core a fundamental belief in the system and a fundamental belief in the importance of that system and its continuity.
Now, over in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the M23 rebel group has withdrawn from several positions near the front line this week. The Kivu Security Barometer, a network of analysts based in the eastern DRC, posted on X that M23 fighters had left at least 12 villages in Lubero territory in North Kivu province. Following M23's withdrawal from Katondi, the capital of the Lubero territory, a local civil society leader said the rebels most likely retreated to their camps in the hills. He added that local militias allied to the Congolese government have since moved into some of these localities. The M23, speaking to AFP, however, said that it was a normal rotation of troops. In recent weeks, North Kivu has seen little frontline movement. Clashes are still continuing regularly between the M23 and government troops. Now, questions are emerging about a possible security vacuum in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo after Uganda announced plans to withdraw some of its troops from the region. The withdrawal comes amid reported disagreements with local authorities, raising fresh concerns about how to maintain security gains made in the joint fight against the ADF armed group. CGTN's Joy Kurikijuma with the details.
Uganda says it is ready to begin withdrawing troops from key positions in eastern DR Congo in coordination with Kinshasa. The announcement was made by Uganda's Chief of Defense Forces, General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, who cited growing tensions between Ugandan forces and local authorities in Ituri province. At the heart of the dispute are restrictions imposed by Provincial Governor Johnny Luboya Nkashama, which Uganda says have hindered operations against the ADF rebel group. Residents in affected areas now express mixed reactions to the planned withdrawal.
They came during the war to help bring peace. Now they're leaving, even though the war is not yet over. We thank them, but our government must take responsibility and secure the area.
ADF has since adopted, shifting into more remote areas and expanding its reach using hit-and-run tactics.
This is a call for responsibility. What happens to areas previously secured jointly? The government must ensure stability moving forward.
Despite the tensions, Kampala maintains that relations with Felix Tshisekedi's government remain strong. However, with armed groups still active and security fragile, the planned withdrawal could mark a critical turning point in eastern DR Congo's complex security environment. Joy Kurikijuma, CGTN.
Well, still in the DRC, UN officials are warning that the conflict in the east is worsening, with fighting spreading beyond traditional hotspots, raising fears of a wider regional crisis. The UN Security Council was informed that a deepening humanitarian emergency and escalating violence was placing millions of civilians at risk. CGTN's Richard Nta has more.
The conflict in eastern DRC is entering a dangerous new phase. Briefing the UN Security Council, Vivian van der Peer, the UN Stabilization Mission's Deputy Special Representative, warned that the situation in South Kivu province is extremely volatile.
Despite the withdrawal by AFC M23 from Uvira on 17 January under international pressure, the situation in South Kivu remains tense, and the renewed hostilities have expanded offensive drones, as well as by continued jamming and spoofing of GPS signals. The use of such capabilities in urban settings raises serious concerns about the risks posed to civilians and civilian infrastructure.
Human rights conditions are also deteriorating, with a mounting humanitarian toll.
Since December 2025, 173 cases of conflict-related sexual violence were confirmed. Restrictions on MONUSCO's access continue to impede its ability to fully monitor in AFC M23-controlled areas. Human rights defenders, journalists, and civil society continue to face intimidation and arbitrary detentions. The humanitarian crisis is further exacerbated by food insecurity, which in 2026 is expected to affect 26.6 million people.
Kinshasa has accused Rwanda of directly backing the M23 rebels, a claim that raises tensions across the Great Lakes region.
The offensives by M23 continue with the support of Rwanda's defense forces. This is a grave violation of our sovereignty. Hundreds of civilians have been killed and millions displaced.
Meanwhile, the U.S. says it remains engaged in seeking a peaceful resolution.
And the United States will remain a committed and
assistance. The crisis in eastern DRC is fast becoming one of the most complex and dangerous conflicts on the continent. Joy Kirukijuma, CGTN.
More than 250,000 people worldwide die from meningitis each year. And this is according to a new study published in the journal Lancet. This belt, which stretches across 26 sub-Saharan countries from Senegal to Ethiopia, had the highest rate of cases. Within this belt, Nigeria, Chad, and Niger are particularly hard hit. The study found that low birth rate, premature birth, and air pollution were the biggest risk factors, while vaccines have brought down the number of meningitis cases and deaths globally. Researchers caution that many deaths from meningitis go unreported, particularly in developing countries. And Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is seeking endorsement for a second term. He made his bid on Friday when the ruling All Progressives Congress launched the 2027 election season with a national convention in Abuja. The two-day event marks the beginning of political campaigning across Nigeria, with Tinubu promising improvements in power supply. However, many Nigerians remain skeptical since taking office, though, in 2023. Tinubu has struggled to deliver on key promises, particularly regarding economic reforms and security. The convention is expected to formally endorse Tinubu on Saturday as the party's candidate for the January 16, 2027 presidential elections, where he will likely face his previous rival, Peter Obi, and others.
We injected approximately 1,500 megawatts into a new grid corridor. We are going to improve on it. Electricity will become better, and be assured there will be opportunity and progress in our industrialization path. Our commitment is to uphold the rule of law, conduct credible elections, and protect the integrity of our elections.
And Malawi is banning dual practice in healthcare, a move which blocks public sector healthcare workers from also holding private medical jobs. The move is aimed at tackling corruption within the public healthcare sector. The ban, though, is being contested in Malawi's High Court, and pending the outcome is yet to be instituted. CGTN's Travis Andrews has more with this report.
Malawi plans to shake up its healthcare sector by introducing a comprehensive ban on dual practice in the healthcare sector. The directive also orders any public health sector worker who owns or partly owns a private medical facility to divest within 30 days or face dismissal. While the ban is currently being contested in Malawi's High Court, the decision has divided the country's healthcare industry.
We may not be conversant with what is happening in other countries, but we can give an example within the same country, Malawi, that for healthcare workers, we have medical or clinical, we have pharmacy, we have public health. Those under pharmacy working in the public health facilities, we understand, are not allowed to open their private pharmacies. So there has been something like a contradiction within the same government or the same nation that others are allowed to practice and others are not, like privately.
The decision to ban dual practice was made by executive order by the country's President Peter Mutharika. The move was aimed at clamping down on corruption, which the government alleges is taking place across multiple public hospitals. It is, though, supported by some within the healthcare sector, who believe action needed to be taken in order to eradicate the practice.
I hear some doctors, they use government time to go to their clinics, or they steal drugs to use at their clinics. So the best way was to deal with this problem at an individual case. Yeah, they should be monitoring those people. They know them, they should be monitoring them. If they are not working in the government during their working time and they concentrate on their private clinics, they can discipline them.
For now, Malawi's High Court will decide whether the ban can be contested or not, and whether the dual practice can be implemented in the country. Travis Andrews, CGTN.
A bit of news from the world of money now. Time for our business segment. Here are the headlines. Coming up in business, Ethiopia urges citizens to adopt alternative means of transport amid global fuel supply crises.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
capital, Addis Ababa, is counting on electric vehicles, including scooters, to help address the
of the city through large-scale urban infrastructure development, but also through non-motorized transportation aimed at creating a livable, inclusive, and globally competitive city. Over the past 2 years, more than 240 kilometers of dedicated bike lanes have been built in Addis Ababa, paving the way for a new mode of transportation to emerge. The use of scooters here was previously rare, but that is changing. Scooter sharing platforms like Fast Eco are starting to emerge.
When we notify them that they can park at different stations, they are very, very pleased by this. So most users pick it from here, go to Mescal or to Magananya, all of these areas to make a transport. So most of our cycle logs are actually for transport from one destination to another destination.
As the government pushes for an alternative transportation, electric scooters are becoming a practical option, especially for young commuters. And now, with the city's major streets featuring a dedicated bike lane, the rise in popularity of electric scooters couldn't come at a better time. Yet, despite the rise in popularity, the number of scooters in the city is far below the demand and what the roads can accommodate.
If we had more of these, they could help reduce traffic congestion, and with dedicated lanes already built through the corridor development, expanding their use would benefit a lot of people. There is no fuel cost, and it makes getting around much easier. Most importantly, they don't pollute the air, which is good for the environment.
Even before the recent global fuel supply crisis, Ethiopia was already working to entrench clean energy use, banning the import of fuel-powered cars, replacing them with electric vehicles.
Electric right now is taking over the global market, like the global transportation ways, because we understand that the global warming, all of this, climate change are affected by the way of the previous transportation systems. And it's not only transportation, but one of them is the transportation. And just to contribute to any type of, green legacy is my honor, and that was one of my visions. I was very inspired by our leader, Prime Minister Abiy. His vision, I should also, be a help of hand for him for it to come true.
Addis Ababa's Transport Bureau says that while the use of scooters for transportation is still at an early stage, it holds significant potential.
In Addis Ababa, since we didn't previously have the infrastructure, the culture of using scooters and bicycles for transport was very limited. But it is now gradually improving. We have enacted regulations to support the use of scooters and bicycles for transport, and we are issuing licenses to operators interested in scooter and bike sharing services. We are also in discussions with companies to manufacture or assemble them locally, and we hope that soon we will see locally made or assembled scooters and bicycles.
The Bureau says that in addition to offering cleaner and fuel-free alternatives, motorless transportation, including scooters, could significantly contribute to road safety and boost the city's tourism experience. Beka Atoma, CGTN, Addis Ababa.
Well, staying in Addis Ababa, where the Invest in Ethiopia 2026 high-level business forum has been successfully held. The flagship forum secured investment agreements worth over $13 billion, with 90% of the investments coming from Chinese companies. The two-day forum was held under the theme, Ethiopia, Ready for Business. It brought together more than 800 global investors and policymakers from over 70 countries. Chinese companies are currently the biggest investors, traders, and contractors in Ethiopia. Ethiopia's Deputy Prime Minister Temasegen Terune highlighted the country's ongoing economic reforms, emphasizing efforts to open key sectors and remove long-standing barriers to investment.
The theme of this year's forum, Ethiopia Ready for Business, is both a declaration and a direction. It reflects a national commitment to building a competitive, predictable, and welcoming environment for investors. But let us also be clear, the status quo is no longer acceptable. It never will be until every Ethiopian has the opportunity to live a secure and healthy life and to succeed.
I highly appreciated the leadership and the determination about Ethiopians officials to understand the pains the investors has been encountered in the country. With the joint efforts from both countries, the environment would be improved, elevated, and benefiting all the stakeholders.
At the Ethiopian Investment Commission, we view investment as a long-term partnership. Our role is not only to attract quality investors, but to support you throughout your journey. We are committed to continuous improvement, to listening carefully, and to working with you to ensure that Ethiopia remains competitive and reliable investment destination.
Online gig work is reshaping how young Africans earn a living. From graphic design to coding and virtual assistants, millions of people are now working for a global client remotely. But while the opportunities are expanding, the reality behind the screens is far more complex, as CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports from Accra.
Emmanuel Ahiale has been working from home for the past 2 years. He gave up his full-time job in a media house in Accra to work as a freelancer. He says working remotely has its perks and drawbacks.
It is both exciting and challenging. Exciting in the part that I work with people across cultures. I work with people from Bangladesh. I work with people from Bolivia. I work with developers from Netherlands and a whole lot. The challenging part is where I'll have to reschedule my time because of the different time zone.
The gig economy is valued at more than $500 billion globally. Analysts say Africa's gig economy is growing at one of the fastest rates across the world. In sub-Saharan Africa, job postings on the largest digital platform grew by 130% in 2023, according to the World Bank. It is largely driven by the continent's rapid smartphone adoption and expanding internet access.
One of the other challenges is the pressure on you to get the next available job because of the time frame within some of these projects have to be completed. At times you finish and you have to be thinking about where the next gig is going to come from, or the next job is going to come from.
Again, the erratic supply of electricity and high cost of data is something remote workers in Ghana have to deal with.
The shift to digital work really picked up during the COVID-19 pandemic, when many people were forced to look online for new sources of income. Here in Ghana, experts say it's happening at a time when finding traditional jobs is becoming increasingly difficult.
But breaking into the global gig economy requires more than just a laptop and internet. Digital skills hubs like this one are training young people to compete internationally, equipping them with the needed skills and tools to compete globally.
Before you get a gig there, you need proper reviews, you need a portfolio, you need to basically have proper negotiation skills. How do you leverage on all of that? Africans are not really there. They do not have knowledge that much on this, and so it becomes difficult. And that's part of the reasons why we even started and initiated Building One for Africans. And so we believed that we can create platforms where we have solely Africans on, but can get jobs all over the world.
Ahiale agrees a platform for gig workers in Africa can further increase their chances of earning sustainable income. Until that happens, he hopes to continue leveraging on his networks online to secure one gig at a time. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Time now for our sports segment. Here are the headlines. Well, coming up in sports, Senegal prepare for their first match since being stripped of the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations title.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours?